Autumn 2020. You are building the gaming PC you have wanted since high school, and the one part you actually need does not exist anywhere near its listed price. The card is supposed to cost around $700. Every retailer's restock sells out in under a minute. Some of them in under 10 seconds, gone before the page even finishes loading. Every marketplace listing runs 2, sometimes 3 times over sticker. 900, 1100 once, absurdly, $1,400 for a single graphics card, and people are actually paying it. Every forum thread you open has the same complaint, restated 1,000 different ways. Miners bought all of them. Bots bought all of them. Somewhere out there, whole warehouses of the exact card you want are running 24 hours a day, doing math for people you will never meet while you are stuck refreshing a stock tracker bot on a Friday night instead of playing anything at all. You do not know much about mining beyond the word itself. Something about cryptocurrency, something about graphics cards doing math nobody asked them to do. Running hot, running loud, running for someone else's profit. You resent it the specific petty way people resent an inconvenience they don't fully understand. Eventually you pay more than you wanted to, almost $300 over the price it should have been, for a card that should never have cost you that much, and you build your computer, and you play your games, and mostly you forget about it. Almost. A year later, you're on Reddit, not looking for anything in particular, and you land in the middle of an argument between people mining coins you've never heard of. Not Bitcoin. Bitcoin stopped being a graphics card game years ago, taken over entirely by machines built for nothing else. Purpose-built boxes that would make your one gaming PC look like a toy. These are smaller coins, the kind a regular graphics card can still actually compete for, and the people arguing about them are doing so with the specific intensity of people comparing spreadsheets. You read for longer than you mean to. An hour turns into 2. You learn just enough, hash rate, difficulty, pool fees, to be dangerous. And you learn something else that surprises you. The coin with the biggest name is rarely the coin with the best return for a single card. The smaller ones, the ones nobody in the mainstream has heard of, often pay better per card because fewer people are competing for them. You download the software everyone in the thread keeps recommending, point it at one of those smaller coins, and let it run overnight on the same card you paid too much for a year ago. The one you were angry about, still angry about if you're honest. In the morning, you check the dashboard before you've even had coffee. You've made $3. $3 is nothing. $3 is less than the coffee you're drinking while you check the number. But $3 for doing absolutely nothing, generated while you were asleep, off a machine that was already sitting in your room anyway, that's a different kind of nothing. You do the math without meaning to. $3 a day is $90 a month off one card. For electricity, you were already half paying to run a computer that mostly sat idle. You leave it running. You buy a second graphics card within the month. Not your main one this time, just for this. It sits on your desk without a case. Wires exposed, a small fan taped on for extra airflow because you read somewhere that heat is the thing that kills profit margins before anything else does. A hot card mines slower, and a slow card earns less. And you have already, without quite admitting it, started thinking in those terms. The room gets a little warmer. The hum becomes something you stop noticing, then something you sleep through completely, the way you'd stop hearing a highway outside your window after enough nights. You build a spreadsheet, 1 tab per card, 1 column per day, and you check it more than you'd admit to anyone. Not because the number's life-changing, because it moves, because it's yours. Generated while you were doing literally anything else. 2 cards clear a little over $6 a day between them, once you subtract what the extra electricity is costing you. It isn't much, but it's consistent, and consistent is a word that starts to matter more to you than exciting. By the time you've got 4 cards running, clearing somewhere around $12 a day, you're not doing this for the novelty anymore. You're doing the math on a fifth. The next several months follow a pattern you could set a clock to. A paycheck comes in. Some of it goes to bills, some of it goes to a card. The new card goes into the rotation, the spreadsheet gets a new column, and the daily number ticks up a little more. 4 cards become 7, 7 becomes 10. At 10 cards, the number in the spreadsheet reads close to $30 a day, and $30 a day is $900 a month. Not enough to quit anything, not even close, but enough that you've started doing a second kind of math in the back of your head every time you're at your actual job, standing behind a register or a counter, or wherever it is you spend the hours. You're not thinking about this. You start comparing your hourly wage to your hourly mining rate, quietly without telling anyone you're doing it. The mining rate is winning more often than you expect it to. The electricity bill arrives at the end of a month where you've had 10 cards running most nights, and it is unmistakably higher, up from around $80 to just over $200. Not catastrophic. You did the arithmetic before you got here. You knew roughly what this was going to cost, kilowatt hours times a rate you looked up and wrote in the spreadsheet weeks ago. But there's a difference between a number in a spreadsheet and a number with your name on an actual bill, and seeing it in print in your own handwriting on the account is a small, specific kind of unsettling. You run the comparison anyway, side by side, the way you have every week since card one. What the electricity cost you this month against what the cards paid out. 200 and change against roughly 900. The second number is bigger. Not by a little, by 4 times over. You buy 2 more cards. Somewhere around 15 cards, your bedroom stops being able to physically hold what you're asking it to hold. The breaker trips the first time you run a hairdryer and the rig at the same time, and you stand there in the dark for a second, doing the math on how close you just came to something much worse than a tripped breaker. You learn things you never expected to need to know. Wire gauge, amperage, the difference between what an outlet can technically handle and what it should actually be asked to handle for 16 hours a day, every day for months. You have an electrician run a dedicated circuit, and you pay for it in cash, and you tell your family it's for a home theater setup, which is not exactly a lie and not exactly the truth either. The room is warm enough now that you sleep with a window cracked in the middle of winter. Whoever shares your space has stopped asking questions and started just accepting that this room runs hotter than the others and always will. Somewhere in the next year, a few cards in a bedroom stops being an accurate description of what's happening in your house by any measure. You've built actual shelving, floor to ceiling, open air frames instead of cases, because cases trap heat, and heat is still the enemy. You've stopped buying single cards and started buying in 2s and 3s whenever the spreadsheet says you can. By 50 cards, you've moved the entire operation out of the house completely into a shed you built specifically for this in the backyard, insulated and vented properly with its own electrical panel, because you read enough about improvised wiring causing actual fires that you took that part seriously even while you were cutting corners on almost everything else. 50 cards running around the clock, clearing somewhere between $150 and $200 a day, after electricity, after the maintenance, after everything. That is more than your job pays you. More than double some months. You do not quit, not yet. The job is the story you tell people about how you afford things. The shed is the actual answer, and for now, only you know that. September 15th, 2022. You know the date because you will never forget it. Ethereum, the backbone of most of what you and everyone like you has been mining, directly or indirectly for 2 years, switches overnight from the system that needed graphics cards to a system that doesn't need them at all. Not a slow decline. Not a warning shot you could plan around. One day the network runs on hardware, and the next day it runs on staked coins instead, and every card in your shed that was pointed at Ethereum is, in the span of a single evening, mining nothing worth anything at all. You are not the only one. Every miner who did what you did is doing exactly what you're doing right now. Panicking, refreshing, redirecting their hardware at whatever's left standing. Ethereum Classic, Ravencoin, Ergo. The coins that used to be the quiet backup plan, nobody bothered mining because the main event paid better. Except everyone has the same backup plan at the same moment. And the difficulty on those networks doubles within hours, because tens of thousands of displaced miners just showed up on the same 3 or 4 chains at once, all competing for the same shrinking reward. The number in your spreadsheet, the one that read $150 to $200 a day for months, drops to something closer to $30. For a fleet that size, $30 a day barely covers what 50 cards cost you in electricity alone. For about a week, you seriously run the numbers on shutting the whole thing down, selling the cards and calling the last 2 years a strange, profitable accident that's now over. You don't shut it down. Instead, you do two things, and only one of them is clever. The first is software. You stop betting the whole shed on a single coin and switch to a system that checks constantly which of a dozen different coins is paying the most right now and moves your hardware there automatically hour by hour if it has to. It isn't a fix for the crash. It just means you stop being the last one in the room to notice when the ground shifts again. The second thing is the one that actually rebuilds you. And it isn't clever, it's just cash. Miners smaller than you, miners who didn't have 2 years of profit sitting in a bank account as a cushion, are dumping their hardware. Whole rigs, barely used, sold for a fraction of what the cards cost 18 months earlier, because their owners need the money back more urgently than they need the hardware itself. You have the money sitting there, exactly because you'd been careful the whole time everyone else was spending. You spend almost all of it, buying cards at half of what you paid for your own, sometimes less. 50 cards become 60 within a month. 60 becomes 90 within 3. You don't just recover from the merge. Within a year, because of the merge, you have very close to double the cards you had before it happened, and the daily number in the spreadsheet has climbed back past where it was and kept going. The next few years stop looking like a hobby that got out of hand and start looking like a business, whether you were planning on that or not. The shed becomes a proper building, then a second building next to it. You negotiate a commercial electricity rate instead of paying residential prices for what has become, by any honest definition, industrial scale power draw. You retire the oldest cards as newer, more efficient generations come out, because the math on running old hardware eventually stops making sense the same way it always does. A card that made sense at 200 watts stops making sense once a newer one does the same work at 130. Somewhere past 100 cards, you stop thinking of this as a side project you're managing around a job and start thinking of the job as the thing you're managing around this. Past 200, the job stops making sense at all. It pays you less in a month than the fleet clears in a good week, and it takes up hours you could spend improving the one thing that's actually working. You give your notice quietly, the same way you've done almost everything else about this, with a story about a trading thing that isn't quite a lie. Somewhere between 200 and 300 machines running around the clock, mining whatever the software decides is worth mining that particular hour, on whichever chain happens to be paying. You stop checking the spreadsheet every single day, not because you stopped caring, because it doesn't need you to anymore. You still think sometimes about the version of you standing in front of an empty store shelf in 2020, angry at people you'd never met for buying hardware you couldn't afford. You never told most people the buildings exist. Not really. Not the extended family, not old coworkers, not the version of your life that still thinks you work a normal job, doing normal hours. It's just a property that hums day and night on land that used to just have a lawn on it. You didn't get here from a secret. You didn't get here from a shortcut or a tip or anything anyone could take away from you by explaining it better than you did. You got here from $3 and then a spreadsheet and then a very long habit of putting the next dollar back in instead of taking it out. Even through the 1 week you almost stopped. The hum used to keep you up at night, back when it meant something might be about to go wrong. Now it's just the sound of not having to think about money at all. Most nights you sleep straight through it. As the extra money kept coming in, a new habit crept in on certain nights. Pulling up a spreadsheet before bed and watching the number update. Dollars per day, dollars per week. A machine hum you'd once resented, now turning into something you could actually measure. The money didn't sit in an account waiting to be spent. You put it into a laundromat 2 blocks from your old apartment, then a small storefront rented out to a nail salon, income that didn't need you awake to keep running. Then came a duplex, then a second one, properties bought outright with mining profits, mortgages paid down by machines nobody ever had to explain to. Eventually you ran the numbers one more time, the mining income, the property income, against the paycheck you used to depend on for everything. And it wasn't close. You handed in your notice, walked out, and never clocked in anywhere again. The machines still hum day and night. So does everything else you build around them now. And for the first time, none of it needs you awake to keep it